You wouldn't believe what happened when I found out the HOA Karen kept sending workers onto my property. I live on a big ranch, and honestly, I love the peace and quiet. But lately things have been, well, strange. Every few days, I'd catch these workers wandering around my barn, and at first, I thought maybe they were just doing some routine maintenance. But the more I looked into it, the more I realized something wasn't right. Turns out the HOA Karen, let's call her Janet, had been sending workers to fix things that didn't even need fixing. You know the type, constantly sticking her nose into other people's business, trying to micromanage everything. She didn't seem to understand that I owned the whole dang ranch, not just the house. But the real kicker, she had no idea that I was keeping track of every single thing going on. And as if that wasn't enough, the last time they showed up, I decided to confront them, only to discover something that made my jaw drop. What I uncovered changed everything. You won't believe what happened next. Stay tuned for the shocking twist. At first, I thought maybe Janet just had a few loose screws. You know the type, always worried about the smallest details, constantly meddling in everyone else's lives. But as the days went on, I started noticing more and more. It wasn't just random maintenance anymore. These workers were taking measurements, poking around my barn, and doing things I never asked for. And every time I asked them what they were doing, they'd give me some vague answer about HOA policies and routine checks. I knew something was off, but here's the thing. The HOA doesn't even technically govern my land. I'm way outside their jurisdiction, which made me question why Janet was so determined to keep sending these workers over. It felt like she was playing some game, and I was stuck in the middle of it. One afternoon, I decided to show up unannounced and see exactly what they were up to. I walked into my barn to find them installing something, some kind of structure that looked totally out of place. And that's when I realized something was seriously wrong. It wasn't just about the barn or the ranch anymore. There was something bigger going on, and I was starting to get the feeling Janet was more involved than I ever could have imagined. I had to get answers. But before I could say anything, one of the workers dropped a bombshell. The worker's eyes darted nervously when I approached. He seemed like he wanted to say something, but then he quickly looked at the others for approval. There was a sense of unease in the air, and I could tell that something was off. I walked up to him, trying to keep my voice calm, and asked again, "What exactly are you doing here?" For a moment, it was silent. Then, almost as if he couldn't hold it in any longer, he blurted out, "We're just following orders, man." "Janet, she said you'd understand." Janet had told them what? I'd never spoken to her directly about any of this, and yet here they were, doing something that felt almost like an invasion of my privacy. What was she up to? Was there something I wasn't seeing? I was starting to feel like I was being played for a fool, but I couldn't quite figure out how. I took a deep breath, trying to process what he had just said. Following orders. From who? And what does "you'd understand" even mean? The worker hesitated for a moment, clearly conflicted. He glanced toward the others again, but before he could respond, another worker, this one wearing a dart cap, spoke up. "It's not what you think," he said, his voice low. "We weren't supposed to tell you, but Janet, she's been getting pressure from the board. They want to expand the neighborhood, and that means your land." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. Expand the neighborhood, my land. What was going on? I had a lot of questions, but suddenly, I felt like I was in way over my head. How far would Janet go to get what she wanted? And more importantly, who else was involved in this shady plan? Before I could ask anything more, the workers quickly packed up their tools and disappeared into the distance, leaving me standing there in the barn with more questions than answers. What was the HOA planning? And how far would Janet take this before I could stop her? I needed to figure it out fast, but something told me this was only the beginning. I stood there in the barn, feeling a cold rush of panic creeping up my spine. Expand the neighborhood. They wanted my land. My entire ranch, everything I had worked for, was on the line. The more I thought about it, the more it felt like a bad dream. I knew Janet was pushy, but this was on a whole new level. I needed to find out everything, every detail, and I needed to act fast. I decided to head straight to the HOA office. It was a small, dingy building on the edge of town, but I had a feeling that behind those walls was where all the strings were being pulled. When I arrived, the receptionist looked at me with suspicion but let me in when I mentioned Janet's name. Her face dropped slightly at the mention of Janet, and that made my stomach turn. Inside the office, everything felt stuffy and tense. It didn't help that the woman behind the desk looked more like a secretary than someone who had the answers I was looking for. But when I pressed her, something unexpected happened. She whispered, "You should be careful. There's more going on here than you think. Janet's not acting alone." Her words left me hanging, and before I could ask more, she quickly excused herself and left the room. Something told me I was getting closer to the truth, but it wasn't going to be easy to find. My mind raced with possibilities. Who else was involved? Was the whole HOA in on this? Or was there something more sinister at play? The tension was building, and with every moment, I felt the walls closing in. The next day, I got a call from a blocked number. I answered, heart pounding. A voice on the other end said, "You need to meet me. There's something you need to see. Come alone." My gut told me this was the break I'd been waiting for, but it also felt like a trap. Should I trust it? Whatever was going on, I knew one thing for sure. I was in way too deep to back out now. I hesitated for a moment before agreeing to meet. My mind was racing. Who could it be on the other end of the line? Why would they want to meet in secret? I decided to take the risk. I had to know the truth. The stakes had already been raised too high. The thought of losing everything, the ranch, my home, was becoming a nightmare I couldn't ignore. I arrived at the location, an old diner on the edge of town. It was quiet, almost too quiet, and the flickering neon sign outside did nothing to ease the gnawing feeling in my gut. I stepped inside, scanning the room for anyone who seemed out of place. A man in a dark jacket sat in the corner booth, his face partially hidden under the brim of a cap. As I approached, he looked up with a knowing expression, his eyes darting nervously as if checking for someone. "You came," he said, his voice low. I sat down, trying to mask my anxiety. "I'm here. Now, tell me what's going on," I demanded, my voice more urgent than I intended. The man glanced around again before leaning in closer. "It's worse than you think. Janet isn't just trying to take your land for the HOA. She's involved with someone much bigger." Before I could process his words, he dropped a bombshell. "The company behind this isn't just interested in expanding the neighborhood. They're planning to build a massive commercial complex here, on your property. And they've been using Janet as their inside woman." The revelation hit me hard. I had been thinking of this as just a petty HOA dispute, but this was something far more dangerous. The land wasn't just a backyard issue. It was a business opportunity that people with far more power were willing to manipulate, even destroy, to get. I felt the ground shifting beneath me. "Who are they?" I asked, voice trembling. Before the man could respond, the door slammed open, and two figures stepped inside. They locked eyes with me. It was Janet and one of the workers from my barn. I could feel my pulse racing as the tension in the room spiked. "Too late," Janet said with a chilling smile. "You shouldn't have gotten involved." The door shut behind them, and the room felt smaller, the air thicker. I was trapped in a game I wasn't prepared for, and now I realized the stakes were higher than I ever imagined. What did Janet and this shadowy company want from me? And how far would they go to get it? I had no choice but to find out, even if it meant risking everything. I felt the weight of the room press down on me as Janet and the worker took their seats across from me. The tension was palpable. It was clear they had been expecting me, and somehow they knew I was onto them. My heart raced, but I refused to show fear. "So, what is it?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "What's the real plan here?" Janet leaned back, her smile a little too smug. "You've been asking all the wrong questions, but I'll tell you everything you need to know. The land you own, Well, it's the perfect spot for the project we've been working on. A massive shopping complex, residential buildings, the works. You've been an obstacle, but I thought if we could make you see the potential. I cut her off, my frustration boiling over. You think you can just waltz in and take my land? Like it's some piece of real estate up for grabs. Janet's calm demeanor didn't waver. In this case, yes, you weren't supposed to find out this soon, but now that you have, it's time for you to understand. We were offering you a deal, compensation, relocation, but now, you've made it personal. I stared at her, my mind scrambling to piece everything together. The workers, the constant interference in my barn, it was all part of a bigger play. But something still didn't sit right. If they had all this power, why hadn't they just taken the land already? Just as I was about to push her for more answers, the man who had contacted me earlier, the one from the diner, burst through the door. But he wasn't alone. He was holding a stack of papers, and with a single look, I could tell this was the moment I had been waiting for. "This ends now," he said, slamming the papers down onto the table. "Janet, you've been working with the wrong people. These are the original land deeds. Your company has been running illegal schemes to manipulate landowners, and I have the proof." Janet's face went pale. Her eyes flickered to the worker beside her, but he seemed as shocked as she was. What is this?" Janet stammered.